remember that I did a list of the most surprisingly dark episodes last year. Okay, actually it was this year since it was finished 4 months late, but let's just pretend it was done last year. Well, since then, a user named JJTheGamer124 requested I do a countdown on the most surprisingly dark video game moments, and I like that idea, so here we are with that list. I know it's kinda early, but look at it this way, it's definitely more on time than my last Halloween countdown. Like with the episode version of this countdown, these aren't ranked by how dark they are, but how dark they are compared to what we thought they'd be. So if the game was already dark to begin with, the moment loses points because you'd already be expecting dark moments. I'd better warn you right now. Some of you might think I'm stupid for some of my choices, especially the number 10 entry, since I have a feeling that some of these aren't even supposed to be dark. But something can still be dark whether or not it's intentional. Well, now that I've said all that, let's get started. If you've played through the Donkey Kong games, chances are that you're familiar with King K. Rool. There's no doubt that he's by far the most famous villain in the Donkey Kong series. But strangely enough, his last appearance was in a rather obscure game called DK Jungle Climber. Well, unless you want to count his appearance in Mario Super Sluggers and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, but when we're talking about the Donkey Kong series itself, his last appearance was all the way back in 2007. And even returns in Tropical Freeze, he was replaced by a banana tiki god and a walrus that stole Elsa's job. Well, after 18 years, it looks like we finally got our answer. And trust me, it's kinda discomforting if you think about it. During the climax of Donkey Kong Bonanza, after beating Void Kong near the Earth's core, the villain world suddenly gets hijacked by King K. Rool, who is revealed to have been buried there ever since his last appearance. Imagine that, being buried and completely stranded thousands of kilometers beneath the earth and having to completely waste away all that time before finally being found. I know this seems like a bit of a stretch to include on the list, and to be honest, it probably is. Maybe I'm thinking too hard about it, but just imagine being completely isolated from all of society, having to spend probably like 18 years of your life rotting away while trapped in some cave millions of feet under the ground, wondering if you'll ever see the light of day again. I won't deny that King K. Rool is definitely evil and probably deserved that, but even if he is a villain, this is a twisted fate for anyone. Pop quiz. When you play a Kingdom Hearts game, what do you expect your main objective in the game to be? To save all worlds from darkness. Dream Drop Distance, however, has the main objective be to take a Mark of Mastery exam. This exam requires you to dive into worlds that haven't been entirely restored after the events of the first game and are currently sleeping. Which, yeah, these worlds do need to be awoken, but it's not completely dark like when the worlds were destroyed in the previous installments. Sure, there are some dark things that happen in some of these worlds, but not only are they not as dark as they were in their respective movies, but they also wouldn't be as much of a surprise if you're familiar with said movies. But then when you get to the game's climax, things take a dark turn. You eventually find out that Xehanort and his minions have sabotaged the exam and have put Sora into a deep sleep. While in it, Sora has dreams where he sees other characters from the Kingdom Hearts franchise, and so he follows them. What he doesn't realize is that if he keeps chasing the dreams, he'll be forever trapped in a never-ending sleep that he will never be able to wake up from. The reason this is higher than the number 10 entry is because unlike that entry, which isn't really dark unless you think about it enough, this game actually focuses on how disturbing the thought of being trapped forever is. And because while being trapped forever is still a horrifying fate, imagine that and basically losing consciousness of yourself. I know this isn't the first time this happened in a Kingdom Hearts game since something like this previously happened in Birth by Sleep, but it comes off as more of a surprise in this game than it did in that game with this game's seemingly low stakes. Can't believe this is only number 9. Shantae Half Genie Hero's climax is quite an interesting one to say the least. Please don't make any dirty jokes about that line. Anyways, Uncle Mimic wants to build this one device called the Dynamo, which he will use to protect Scuttletown from dangers. But unfortunately, during the finale, the evil Risky Boot sabotaged it by swapping the real blueprints for the machine with her own so that once it's finished, the Dynamo would create negative energy, which Risky plans on using to invert the Genie Realm's magical polarity and turn all of the genies in it evil. Shantae then infiltrates Risky's lair and does everything in her power to stop Risky's evil plan, only to find out that she's too late, because the Genie Realm and all of the genies have already become corrupted. And now, Shantae is left with no other choice than to destroy the genie realm in order to save the world. How many times do you find a main protagonist being forced to destroy an entire world for the sake of the greater good? We're talking about a situation where wiping out an entire dimension, which will also end up killing every genie that inhabits it, is the less bad of the two things that could happen. But it's this low on the list because that isn't the canon ending to the game. In the good ending, which needless to say is the canon ending, Uncle Mimic's magical polarizer is able to save the genie realm at the last minute. But in the game's bad ending, no such thing happens. Well, I guess it only goes to show that sometimes heroes have to make tough decisions in order to do the right thing. Sonic Mania is a game that tries to recapture the nostalgia of the older Sonic games. I personally think it makes the game feel more like a nostalgia-pandering rehash, as I've said before. Before anyone gets mad, I do think the game is okay, but it could have been better if it didn't play it too safe. But the fact that the plot is completely straightforward like the original games does make one level in the game all the more surprising. Welcome to Oil Ocean Zone. The first act seems alright, even though it does deal with pollution. The original Oil Ocean Zone did that too, so I guess that's to be expected. But then the next act comes and just see it for yourself. The fact that we're watching this area's climate actually being ruined like this with air pollution and global warming. This is even more emphasized by how flammable some of the oil pools are, the horrifying red background, and the smoke which keeps getting thicker and thicker until it causes you to start slowly losing rings. If that's anything to go by, then that means that no living thing can survive here. Well, unless you're able to pull the chain switches to clear the air for a bit of time, showing us the horrible things that happen in this place because of Eggman's actions, not to mention how much water has been polluted, so we can probably assume that hundreds of sea creatures died because of him. Sure, you could also say that about Oil Ocean Zone in Sonic 2, but in that game a lot of us didn't really notice how awful this was. So to have the previously mentioned background, flammable oil pools, and smoke will make these aspects of the level a lot more noticeable. I'd be surprised to see a moment this dark even in a 3D Sonic game, but in a 2D Sonic game, it's just a horrific contrast to the rest of the levels in the game. Generation 3 introduced some features that have become a mainstay in the Pokemon franchise. Okay, pretty much every generation did that, but this generation introduced some things that greatly strengthened the plots of Pokemon games, two which are going to play a major factor in the century. The first one is that the Box Legendary actually plays an important role in the plot. Unlike Ho-Oh and Lugia, which you could go through the entire game without even knowing about them, the other improvement is how the villain teams actually pose a much bigger threat. Unlike Team Rocket, whose crimes for the most part just consists of attempted thievery and taking over an important building, Team Aqua and Magma's goals are to completely alter the world. In Sapphire, Team Aqua wants to expand the sea, while in Ruby, Team Magma wants to expand the land. But let's focus on the Sapphire version for reasons I'll get to in a bit. Anyways, in one of the later parts of your journey, you encounter Team Aqua, who is planning on expanding the sea with the power of the ancient Pokemon Kyogre. So you fight against their leader Archie, and now it looks like their plans are foiled because all villainous teams in Pokemon games are stupid enough to think they have to stop their evil plans just because they lost some Pokemon battle. Nope, Archie isn't stupid. Well, at least not this time. Even though he lost, he still summons Kyogre, who then proceeds to summon a powerful rainstorm. Unfortunately, it turns out that Archie greatly underestimated Kyogre's power, and the rainstorm turns out to be far more dangerous than Archie had initially anticipated. In fact, it's so great that unless something is done to stop Kyogre, the rainstorm will continue until it floods the entire world. Now, the reason I regard this as darker than the drought in the Ruby version is because Earth is already 70% water, so it would flood faster than it would dry up, leaving us with even less time to save the world. Nostalgia-blind fanboys can glorify Team Rocket all they want, but you can't deny that their crimes have nothing on this. True, this does cause Archie to see the error of his ways, which can't be said about the villain leaders of the next 3 generations, but even if he does reform, this is a huge step forward in terms of Pokemon villain accomplishments, and it really set the standards for how threatening villain teams would be in future generations. At least until one day when Game Freak just decided that they're too afraid to have actually intimidating villain teams anymore. Yoshi's Woolly World seems about as lighthearted as any Yoshi game, especially since everything in it is made of yarn, and those of you who remember Kirby's Epic Yarn may expect this game to be as lighthearted as that one. I mean, sure, the game does begin with dozens of innocent Yoshis being unraveled and turned into bundles of yarn, which is kinda messed up, but it's all okay in the end because they eventually get returned to normal, at least if you're a completionist. The level Fluff and Puffin babysitting seems like it'll be no different. It's nice to see the Fluff and Puffins return from Yoshi's Island. They were fun to use, and this time it looks like they can be thrown to create cloud platforms, which is also a fun gimmick. And when you combine that with one of the most relaxing songs in the game, it seems like you don't have anything to worry about. So you throw them and... wait, what happened to it? Oh no, please don't tell me. Did it die? I gotta ask. What was Goodfeel thinking when they designed this level? It is true that the level itself is pretty fun when you're not thinking too hard about it, but if you do think about it, you probably won't enjoy it as much when you were thinking about the fact that Yoshi is single-handedly slaughtering baby birds one by one. I know it might sound like I'm looking too deep into this, but how do you explain the fact that they just evaporate into thin air after being thrown? What are we supposed to think? That they just magically teleport back to their mommy? Well, that's another question because you kill their mother too. Killing the mother of a group of baby birds and leaving them orphaned, and then killing the babies? And people are still stupid enough to think that Mario sacrifices Yoshi all the time in Super Mario World? Well, this is much worse than dropping a dinosaur off a cliff one time. At least in Super Mario World, you can always just, oh, I don't know, not sacrifice him? This time, however, you have to sacrifice a lot of Fluff and Puffins in order to beat the level. I understand that you also use them as eggs in Yoshi's Island, but at least then they couldn't really die unless you threw them in a way that they can't come back to you. And you also didn't kill their mother, just stunned her for a few seconds. If this doesn't get Yoshi nominated for Worst Babysitter Ever, I don't know what will. I've made it clear before that I wasn't a very big fan of Paper Mario the Origami King. And yes, I know some of you already know exactly what moment I'm building up to. Be patient. I'm getting there. Like I was saying, I wasn't a big fan of this game, but I guess I should give credit where credit is due. It does try to take a step in the right direction towards people are asking for in a Paper Mario game. I mean, they have a long way to go if they ever hope to live up to their predecessors, but it's a start. One thing this game does right is how you get multiple partners throughout the game, just like in the older games. It would have helped if they had more abilities to use on the overworld, different types of attacks, or actually staying with you for the rest of the game, but again, it's a start. And that last problem I listed does allow for the next entry on the list. In Chapter 2, you get a new partner, a Bob named Bobby. He can be really annoying at times with how he keeps constantly forcing you to go out of your way to find him, but he's still a good guy overall, and proves to be pretty good in battle. So, after beating the second chapter in the game, you and Bobby make your way to the third streamer, when suddenly, the game's villain, Ollie, appears and uses a giant boulder to crush Olivia. But it seems like Bobby knows what to do in this situation. To go play a game of Wind Waker Mario Edition to find a box that contains the very thing you need in order to destroy the giant rock and save Olivia. So you find it and bring it back, and the thing that the box contains turns out to be a fuse, which Bobby will use to blow himself up to destroy the boulder. Okay, sounds simple enough. Just blow yourself up to wait, what? Oh my gosh! I can't believe they just did that! You saw that right. We just watched a Mario character commit suicide on screen. This isn't the case of the game trying to fake you out. You'd think he'd respond like Bobbery and Bombette do when they explode, but he doesn't. Bobby is actually gone. I can't believe Nintendo would even think to have a scene like this. While it is true that we have seen hundreds of other bombs exploding in the Mario series, you never really noticed how dark it was unless you really took a step back and thought about it. But here, they actually confirmed that Bobby is dead. Granted, it's kind of weird that something you see all the time in Mario games is suddenly being portrayed as this big dramatic emotional moment, but nevertheless, this scene will just hurt. We even see his ghost shortly after. It was mentioned earlier that bombs have short lives, but just how fast the scene escalated from what seemed like just another case of clearing an obstacle in a video game to a scene where a character literally kills himself. When I first saw this, I was caught almost completely off guard. I was thinking happy thoughts at this moment up until the reveal, so to suddenly have said reveal thrown at me, I think you can imagine how that must feel. Like I said, this game does seem like it's trying to give us what we used to get, by having more meaningful moments like this. And it makes me wonder, does Bowser design all of his bombs with personalities knowing that their sole purpose in life is to kill themselves? Because in most Mario games, it's debatable whether or not they're actually sentient or if they're just emotionless animated weapons. But since Bobby actually is implied to be a living thing with an actual personality, who's to say that not all Bob-ombs are like that? I knew that Bowser was evil, but I didn't think he was this sadistic. And to think, game theory fanboys actually think Mario is worse than Bowser? I highly doubt that. But even if Bobby is alone in being a Bob-omb with actual sentience, I don't blame Olivia for being depressed after this part. May Bobby rest in peace. It's no secret that Kefka is one of, if not the most evil villain in Final Fantasy history. So much that caused a lot of people to say that he's a better villain than Sephiroth. Now, I do think that both Kefka and Sephiroth are awesome villains, but Kefka definitely has Sephiroth beaten in terms of the evilness factor. Oh, but he's just a silly little clown. How evil could a silly little clown possibly be? Just wait. About halfway through the game, you get to the floating continent and confront Kefka, who plans on moving the statues of the Warring Triad to start a literal apocalypse. You try to stop him, but you don't make it. Kefka shifts the Warring Triad statues, which disrupts the flow of magic, throwing the entire world into ruin, which results in countless innocent lives being lost. This is quite an accomplishment for villains. Unlike most villains who only try to destroy the world, Kefka actually did destroy it. I doubt many of you would have expected a villain to successfully destroy the planet, let alone in a game from all the way back in the Super Nintendo era. While there have been other dark moments in the series prior to this game, none of them were anywhere near as big a scale as this. Now, unfortunately, I already knew about the scene years before I first played this game. As a matter of fact, I knew about it before I even started playing Final Fantasy games in general. But like I said about Road to the North Pole in my last Halloween countdown, even if it was 4 months late, they don't have to be surprising to me. At least the world does get restored at the end of the game, which keeps it from being number 1. But even if it does, that doesn't bring back the innocent people who were killed during the world's destruction. Especially since there's a 1-year time skip after the apocalypse. So that means the world is like that for at least a year before finally being restored. I don't really know what else to say. The world has ended. I think that pretty much speaks for itself. As Alex said in his top 15 final bosses list, Super Metroid was basically a glorified remake of the original Metroid because of how the game is presented. Now, I'm not saying the game is bad in any way, as a matter of fact it's my favorite Metroid game, but I do agree with how much it takes from the NES game. The finale is one of the most noticeable instances of similarities. While a lot of Turin does look completely different than it did in the first game, parts of it are also very alike, including the room where you face the final boss. While the final boss itself does change drastically in the second phase, the only thing that's really gotten darker is the part where the infant Metroid dies. But what really changes is the escape mission that happens right after the final fight. At first it seems like it's just the same escape mission as the one in the original, just with a few more rooms, until you realize that this time around, not only do you have to escape from Turin, but the entire planet. You heard right, this game ends with Samus destroying an entire planet. I know it's not really anything special since 4 other Metroid games also end with a planet being destroyed, but this was the first Metroid game to do so if you're playing the games in order of release, you're much more likely to be surprised by it. This isn't like with some of the previous entries on the list that feature worlds being destroyed, where the destruction is preventable or gets undone in the end. Planet Zebus actually stays destroyed, and this is the only ending to the game. I mean, sure, you can save the Edquins and Dachora, but when we're talking about an entire planet with billions of life forms on it, I'm pretty sure that just 4 survivors won't even lay a scratch on what percentage of them were killed. You can't even save the Tatori, even though they also helped you earlier. And we can also assume that millions of other life forms on planet Zebus are also innocent, and Samus killed them all. And what's more, this is technically Samus' home planet. Even if she wasn't born on it, she was still raised on it, so this is technically her home planet and it's being destroyed. And because Samus' actions have ended up destroying 5 planets in her adventures, it makes me wonder if Samus really is the hero we make her out to be. Okay, granted 2 of those were evil planets and had to be destroyed for the sake of the universe, but I'm pretty sure the other 3 aren't. Her job is to save the planets from destruction, yet when multiple planets have been destroyed because of her, it's becoming a bit harder to see her as a hero. She's still one of my favorite protagonists in video games, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. And this was the beginning of that trend of planets being destroyed in the Metroid series. But what could possibly be more surprisingly dark than watching an entire planet blow up? Before we get to number 1, here are the honorable mentions. Bowser and Kamek's planet in Yoshi's Island DS. These 2 are looking for stars that'll help them take over the world, which are later revealed to reside in the hearts of certain infants. That makes it sound like these guys would actually sink as low as to rip open the hearts of babies. That is truly revolting, and I really wanted to put it on the list. But I couldn't because, unlike with Fluff and Puff and babysitting, all of the babies are saved before it's too late. Shiverstar from Kirby 64. Just this design combined with some of the horrific things you see in the factory, that could easily give off the impression that this is Earth after being frozen over and subdued to a robot apocalypse. But it hasn't been confirmed that this is actually Earth. It's still horrific beyond belief, and I do not apologize for putting it on my scariest moments and creepiest levels lists. But since the game never says that this really is Earth, it's not on here. The planet's paralysis from the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers games. I was thinking of putting them on here, but since the world has been in danger multiple times in the franchise before this point, it's not as big a step in terms of darkness as a heavy rain, and because dark futures, while definitely terrifying, aren't exactly uncommon in media. The revelation that nobodies have no afterlives in Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 days. This would have been on here, and very high on the list I might add, if the series didn't later retcon that and reveal that nobodies actually become recompleted when they die. 2D's transformation from Banjo-Kazooie and Bottle's death from Banjo-Tooie. Even though Bottles later gets revived, and 2D's transformation does get prevented in the end, I was having a really difficult time deciding which one of the two should be on here. But since they barely missed the list, that means I don't have to decide. The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. A game that, as far as Zelda games go, appears to be rather lighthearted because it seems to have the lowest stakes in any Zelda game. Well, for a couple decades anyway. No evil conquerors, no kingdom being threatened, just Link needing to get home after being stranded on an island. Not even an uncharted island, because Koholint is fully inhabited and doesn't seem like half bad a place to spend the rest of your life. But Link still has to get home, so we gotta do that. The only way to get home is to go on a quest to collect the 8 instruments of the sirens in order to wake the windfish. Sounds simple enough, at least until you get to the end of the 3rd quarter of the game, where you will learn some terrifying news that will completely change everything. It is revealed that all of Koholint Island is all a dream, and once the windfish is awoken, the entire island and everyone who lives there will be gone forever. This new bit of information adds several layers of tension and turns what seemed like a very harmless game into an anxiety-inducing experience. For the last quarter of the game, you may just find yourself repeatedly asking yourself if your quest is really worth it. To destroy an entire island and kill thousands of innocent people and animals just to get home. I know for a fact that my first experience with the game was like that. Most games would feature you trying to prevent something like this, but in this game, that is how the game ends. I've noticed that some people were surprised it wasn't on my Darkest Zelda Moments list. The reason why was because I was told that since everything on the island was just a dream, nothing was really lost, but after I did my list, I was told that this moment could still be considered dark. So if you want to know where this would have been if it was on the list, it would have taken the number 3 spot. Now, I was debating whether or not this should actually qualify for the list or not, let alone at number 1, because you do know about the plot twist for the last quarter of the game before it actually happens. Even my fans seem pretty divided on whether I should include it or not, making it hard to decide. Well, since there was no clear answer, I decided to go with which option I wanted to and include it. Because even though the island's destruction is mentioned a while before it actually gets destroyed, the revelation is still almost guaranteed to leave you in shock. Not to mention the fact that the game actually goes through with it. Most forms of media like this have the characters make the tough choice to sacrifice something, but then it turns out they didn't have to, usually because some rule was changed or because the writers just decided to pull some magic loophole out of their butts. But this game doesn't do either of those. The island and all of its inhabitants really are gone forever. So for those who expected the game to just turn back and reveal that the island can still be saved, this will be quite the emotional gut punch. Super Metroid's ending may have been arguably darker, but at least that game didn't have a misleadingly lighthearted tone leaving you with a false sense of security. When we have a game that seems like it's going to be completely harmless for Zelda standards, only to hit you with this plot twist, I thought it would only be appropriate to regard this as what I personally think is the most surprisingly dark moment in video games.